Major funding for this program provided by the National Endowment for the Humanities, because democracy demands wisdom. The Robert H. N. Ho Family Foundation. Additional funding provided by the Arthur Vining Davis Foundations, dedicated to strengthening America's future through education. The Shin Yo-en Foundation, the Bumper Foundation, and the Shelley and Donald Rubin Foundation. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
"2,500 years ago, nestled in a fertile valley along the border between India and Nepal, a child was born who was to become the Buddha. The stories say that before his birth, his mother, the queen of a small Indian kingdom, had a dream.
A beautiful white elephant offered the queen a lotus flower and then entered the side of her body. When sages were asked to interpret the dream, they predicted the queen would give birth to a son, destined to become either a great ruler or a holy man. One day, they said, he would either conquer the world or become an enlightened being, the Buddha.
People like stories. It is one of the ways we learn. The story of the Buddha's life is an archetypal journey, but it is a means to an end. It is not an end.
Within 10 months, as a tree lowered a branch to support her, a baby boy was born, emerging from her side. 7 days later, the queen died. The world is filled with pain and sorrow, the Buddha would one day teach. But I have found a serenity, he told his followers, that you can find too.
Everybody understands suffering. It's something that we all share with everybody else. It's at once utterly intimate and utterly shared. So Buddha says, that's a place to begin. That's where we begin.
No matter what your circumstances, you will end up losing everything you love. You will end up aging. You will end up ill. And the problem is that we need to figure out how to make that all be all right.
What he actually said was that life is blissful. There's joy everywhere, only we're closed off to it. His teachings were actually about opening up the joyful or blissful nature of reality. But the bliss and the joy is in the transitoriness. Do you see this glass? I love this glass. It holds the water admirably. When I tap it, it has a lovely ring. When the sun shines on it, it reflects the light beautifully. But when the wind blows and the glass falls off the shelf and breaks, or if my elbow hits it and it falls to the ground, I say, of course. But when I know that the glass is already broken, every minute with it is precious.
Everybody, every human being wants happiness. And Buddha, he acts like a teacher. You are your own master. Future, everything depends on your own shoulder. Buddha's responsibility is just to show the path. That's all.
The Buddha can shine out from the eyes of anybody. Inside the buffeting of an ordinary human life, at any moment what the Buddha found, we can find.
In southern Nepal, at the foot of the Himalayas, is one of the world's holiest places, Lumbini, where, according to the sacred tales, the Buddha was born. Today, Buddhist pilgrims from all over the world make their way here to be in the presence of the sage whose life story is inseparable from centuries of anecdotes and legends.
There are countless stories of the Buddha. Each tradition, each culture, each time period has their own stories. We have lots of visual narratives and artwork from all over Buddhist Asia. But the first written material, actually, the first biography, say, of the Buddha, really, we don't see that before about 500 years after his death. For the first few centuries, Buddhist narrative was oral.
Historically, it is based on something certainly that happened. There must have been someone who corresponded with Gautama Buddha, who we don't know. We don't know how much of it is pure fairy tale and how much of it is historic fact. But it doesn't matter. It touches something that we all basically know.
The relevance of it is in the message of the story, the promise of the story. Like any good story, it has a lot to teach. So the story of his life, then, is a beautiful way of telling the teaching.
He who sees me sees the teaching, the Buddha said. And he who sees the teaching sees me. Born some 500 years before the birth of Jesus, the Buddha would grow to manhood in a town vanished long ago. For nearly 3 decades, he would see nothing of the world beyond. The tales say he was the son of a king, raised in a palace with every imaginable luxury. He was called Siddhartha Gautama, a prince among a clan of warriors. When I was a child, he said, I was delicately brought up, most delicately. A white sunshade was held over me day and night to protect me from cold, heat, dust, dirt, and dew. My father gave me 3 lotus ponds. One where red lotuses bloomed. One where white lotuses bloomed. One where blue lotuses bloomed.
The father wants him to be a king, wants him to conquer the world, to be the emperor of India, which at that time was 16 different kingdoms. And it was predicted that he would be able to conquer wherever he wanted if he remained as a king. So the father was creating this artificial environment to coddle him.
His father wanted to prevent him from ever noticing that anything might be wrong with the world, because he hoped that he would stay in the life they knew and loved and not go off as was predicted at his birth and possibly become a spiritual teacher rather than a king.
Shielded from pain and suffering, Siddhartha indulged in a life of pure pleasure. Every whim satisfied, every desire fulfilled. I wore the most costly garments, ate the finest foods. I was surrounded by beautiful women. During the rainy season, I stayed in my palace, where I was entertained by musicians and dancing girls. I never even thought of leaving. When he was 16, his father, drawing him tighter into palace life, married him to his cousin. It wasn't long before they fell in love.
He was totally in love with her. There is a story that on their honeymoon, which was about 10 years long, at one time they rolled off the roof that they were making love on while in union, and they fell down but landed in a bed of lotuses and lilies and didn't notice they had fallen.
And so, the stories say, he indulged himself for 29 years, until the shimmering bubble of pleasure burst.
His father does everything he can to never let him leave, never let him see the suffering that life is. But one day he goes outside and he's traveling through the kingdom and he has the first of 4 encounters. He sees an old man and he asks his attendant, and the attendant says, "Oh, that's change. One doesn't always stay young and perfect." Then on the next tour outside, he sees a sick man and doesn't quite understand what it is. He asks his attendant, and the attendant says, "Oh, that happens to all of us."
Everybody gets sick, and don't think you are a prince, you will not get sick. Your father will get sick, your mom will get sick, everybody will become sick.
Then he sees that it isn't just the sick person, in fact it's universal, and something is stimulated inside of him, so he keeps getting the chariot driver to take him out, and he sees, horror after horror.
And on his 3rd trip outside, he meets a corpse.